To order the City Council meeting for the City of Highland Park, Illinois, March 11th, 2024. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmember Ross.
Present.
Councilmember Hubler. Councilmember Tapia.
Present.
Councilmember Littwer.
Here.
Councilmember Stone. Here. Councilmember Bloomberg. Mayor Rotering.
Here, we have a quorum. We send our best wishes to Councilmember Hubler for a speedy recovery. And I now ask that we stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
One nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I am seeking a motion to approve the minutes of the regular City Council meeting held February 26, 2024.
To approve them as amended?
Second.
All those in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the minutes are approved. May I have a motion to approve the warrant list?
So moved.
Second.
Any comments or questions on the warrant list? Hearing none, will the clerk please call that vote?
Councilmember Ross.
Aye.
Councilmember Tapia.
Aye.
Councilmember Littwer.
Aye.
Councilmember Stone. Councilmember Bloomberg.
Aye.
Mayor Rotering.
Aye, 6 ayes, no nays, and the warrant list is approved. We will now continue to the report of the mayor. This past weekend, as we welcomed longer days, we were reminded that 5 months have now passed since more than 100 adults and children were taken hostage from Israel. Since then, their families and friends here in Highland Park, in Israel, and around the world have called for their immediate and safe return home. We continue to remember all those who are still held hostage, and we share our support for their loved ones. I have no appointments this evening. I do have 3 proclamations this evening. As a city, we are proud to support the crucial role that pollinators play in ensuring a healthy ecosystem by renewing our commitment to the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. Highland Park joins local communities across the country in taking action to create habitat for the monarch butterfly and other pollinators, and to provide public education and advocacy. I am now going to read the proclamation in support of monarch butterflies. Whereas over the past couple of decades, the migrating population of monarch butterflies has plummeted due to habitat loss and environmental stress from an estimated 1 billion to record low numbers. The World Wildlife Federation reports that the eastern monarch butterfly populations wintering in Mexico have decreased 59% in 2024 compared to last year. That's 1 year. Whereas the near extermination of milkweed, the only plant on which monarchs lay their eggs, is the prime reason for the alarming decline. We must not delay any longer if we hope to reverse this trend. The iconic monarch's migration route from Mexico to Canada includes Highland Park, Illinois, and it is within our ability and power to take action to help save the monarch butterfly. And whereas we know that one source of hope for monarch survival is that individuals, institutions, and organizations can make a difference by including monarch-friendly native plants, especially milkweed, in their landscapes. And whereas, furthermore, concerned citizens and organizations across the country are joining forces to create monarch way stations to sustain the insects along their annual migration routes. Now, therefore, I, Nancy Rotering, Mayor of the City of Highland Park, do hereby proclaim that Highland Park be a monarch way station and urge all residents of the community to do their part by planting milkweed, the exclusive food source for monarch larvae, so that every parcel of property in Highland Park may contribute to the survival of the monarch butterfly. And we encourage everyone to join us in this important effort to create pollinator habitat. It's now my pleasure to invite Candace Dalrymple of Habitat HP to accept this proclamation and share more about this grassroots initiative. Candace, please come to the phone.
Good evening, Mayor Rotering, members of council. Thank you, Mayor Rotering, for taking the Mayor's Monarch Pledge on behalf of Highland Park. I am Candace Dalrymple. As introduced, I'm part of a team of city residents who are working on an initiative called Habitat Highland Park. We've been at it a couple of years now. Under the auspices of the National Wildlife Federation, we are collaborating with Go Green Highland Park, with the League of Women Voters of Highland Park Highwood, and with sponsorship from the Rotary Club of Highland Park. We hope to increase community awareness of recent declines in our pollinator population, certainly including monarch butterflies. As we all know, pollinators are the foundation of the food chain that ultimately yields the fruits and vegetables that we all depend upon. Pollinator populations have declined precipitously from in the last several decades from loss of habitat associated with grass-focused landscaping, overuse of pesticides, and our dependence upon gas-powered leaf blowers that destroy the delicate habitats while pushing leaves and grasses out of our yards. There's a more sustainable way to garden. By developing gardens that offer native plants and water for pollinator sustenance and safe places to nest and raise their young, we're building a network of resources and strengthening local pollinators' ability to thrive. We're working to secure National Wildlife Federation recognition of Highland Park as a community wildlife habitat. The Mayor's Monarch Pledge and all the sustainability initiatives supported by our city are critical to these efforts. Thank you for taking the Mayor's Monarch Pledge. I just have one bit of information to share with all of you. Next Sunday, May 17th, very green day, St. Patrick's Day, Habitat Highland Park is offering a program at our library called Garden for Wildlife Resource Fair. It'll take place between 2 and 4 p.m., and attendees will be able to see a short film on the importance of sustainable landscape practices, and they'll be able to chat with members of local environmental groups, not just ours, but several others, and learn how to identify native plants and how to designate pollinator-friendly gardens. We also will be giving away free coneflower seeds that will grow into spectacularly beautiful flowers that will attract many pollinator species and the ruby-throated hummingbirds that we all love to your backyard. We invite you to join us next Sunday, 2 to 4 p.m. at the library. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, just as a
Go for it.
Okay. Well, I just want to remind the public that the City Council last year passed a gas-powered leaf blower ban. There's a transition period of about 3 years. We're already well into the first year of that. There's a lot of details on the city website on that, but in terms of your statement, we're taking one more step in that direction.
Thank you, Councilmember Tapia. But wait, there's more. So March 18th to 24th, 2024 is Fix a Leak Week, and an annual initiative sponsored by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency's Water Sense program in support of water conservation efforts. This week is an opportunity to improve the water efficiency of your home by finding and fixing leaks. We have a proclamation. Whereas water is a basic and essential need of every living creature, and whereas the amount of water leaked from U.S. homes is estimated to be more than 1 trillion gallons per year, these leaks account for an average of 11,000 gallons of water per home wasted, with 10% of homes having leaks that waste 90 gallons or more per day. Whereas common types of leaks found in the home include leaking toilet flappers, dripping faucets, and other leaking valves. In most cases, fixture replacement parts don't require a major investment and can be installed by do-it-yourselfers. Fixing easily corrected household water leaks can save homeowners 10% or more on their utility costs. There was approximately 4% of the nation's electricity consumption is used moving or treating water and wastewater. One of the best ways to save energy across the country and in our own homes is to use water more efficiently. And whereas Water Sense is a partnership program sponsored by the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency to protect the future of our nation's water supply by promoting and enhancing the market for water-efficient products and services. March 20 to 26 marks the Water Sense program's Fix a Leak Week, a time to remind Americans to check their household fixtures and irrigation systems for leaks. Whereas the City of Highland Park has been a Water Sense promotional partner since 2009. Now, therefore, I, Nancy Rotering, Mayor of the City of Highland Park, and the City Council of the City of Highland Park, do hereby proclaim the week of March 20 to 26th as Fix a Leak Week in the City of Highland Park, and urge each citizen and business to help protect our precious resource by practicing water-saving measures and becoming more aware of the need to save water. And I'd like to invite Ron Bannon, Director of Public Works, to accept this proclamation. Yep.
To check our website for more information on water efficiency. We have a program called My Water Use in Highland Park that you can sign up for free. It's also known as Water Smart, so there's a couple names. But it's something can alert you to unusual usage and provides tips for fixing those. It's a free service. So.
Thank you very much.
Unless you think this is just a program or just an email you get, my brother had a 1/2 inch pipe split at his home in the middle of last winter. And of 18 hours, they had, I don't know, 380 tons. I don't know what it was, like 30,000? No, 38,000 gallons of water poured into his house and totally demolished 2 floors and went all the way to the basement. And the only reason they knew, because they were out of town for the winter holidays, was because they got an email saying your water usage is unreasonably high. And the fire department went in, and a neighbor went in, and thank God, they stopped it at that amount, the 38,000, by the way. I'm sorry if I misspoke. But it's an amazing program. Those for doing this.
Thank you. We are embracing our sustainable roots today. I have one more proclamation. April 2nd through 8th, 2024 is International Dark Sky Week, observed annually coincidentally with the new moon in April. International Dark Sky Week is an opportunity to learn about the harmful effects of light pollution during Global Astronomy Month. I have a proclamation. Whereas the aesthetic beauty and wonder of a natural night sky is a shared heritage of all humankind, and whereas artificial light can cause light pollution, including sky glow, unnecessary glare, and light trespass, and whereas research shows light pollution negatively impacts human health, the health of our wildlife friends, including migrating birds and nocturnal pollinators, and whereas unnecessary use of artificial light at night further impacts energy sustainability, the cost of energy, and our global climate, and whereas Dark Sky International principles state that the productive and safe need for outdoor light at night should consider, 1, the productive and safe purpose of the light, 2, targeting that light appropriately, 3, limiting the use and duration, 4, using lights that reduce or eliminate harmful white and blue light in favor of softer, more amber light, and 5, using lights that reduce the intensity and brightness of the light. And whereas dark sky-friendly lighting design, fixtures, and bulbs are functional, healthy, and beautiful, and incorporation of these dark sky-friendly principles will save energy and money, reduce greenhouse gas emissions, and more generally reduce the negative effects of light pollution. And whereas the City of Highland Park amended its zoning ordinance regarding dark sky-related illumination standards in 2018, now therefore I, Nancy Rotering, Mayor of the City of Highland Park, and the City Council of the City of Highland Park, do hereby proclaim the week of April 2nd through 8th as International Dark Sky Week in the City of Highland Park, and urge each resident and business to raise awareness of light pollution and encourage the protection and enjoyment of dark skies and responsible outdoor lighting. And I think it's important to note that this year International Dark Sky Week concludes on Monday, April 8th, when a total solar eclipse will cross North America. Northern Illinois is set to experience an exciting partial eclipse, although we are not in the path of totality. That's about 3 hours away. Visit adlerplanetarium.org for more information about safely viewing the partial solar eclipse. Nobody is taking this proclamation, so I'm going to give it to Kim Stone, the champion of dark sky policies. Thank you. And with that, I have no other business. We do have business from the council. We're going to hear Councilmember Hubler's report at his next. No, Councilmember Hubler's not here, so we're going to hear his report at our next meeting. Oh, I'm so sorry. Nobody told me that. Okay. So if you, where are we? So let's talk first about Business and Economic Development Advisory Group, and then you will continue on as the council liaison to the Highland Park Community Foundation to provide an update. So thank you, Councilmember Lidwar.
I'm pleased to present a report on behalf of the Business and Economic Development Advisory Group, better known as BDAG, and that's how I'm going to refer to it, for which I serve as the alternate council liaison to Councilmember Hubler. The BDAG has the following objectives: to support community programs that promote the city's business and economic development, to provide recommendations for the business development strategic plan, to provide recommendations for projects, programs, or policies to enhance the city's business and economic activity, and to assist with business development outreach and communications. In January, the BDAG reviewed the city's event and business marketing website, enjoyhp.com, and recommended updates. They also discussed ways to incentivize property owners to attract desired restaurants, experiential uses, and retail boutiques. The group is currently working on projects including updating the city's guide to opening a business, hosting a meeting with Mayor Rotering to engage with the business community, conducting a business outreach campaign to visit new and existing businesses quarterly to gather information that may be used to improve city services, and contributing to the success of local businesses. Later this year, the advisory will review the business development strategic plan and recommend updates for 2025 through 2027. The BDAG comprises 10 voting members who are residents with various backgrounds and 2 Highland Park High School student advisors. The chamber director attends the meetings as well and enhances their agendas. Carolyn Hirsch, business development manager, serves as the staff liaison. And they are open to input. These are public meetings.
Thank you.
And secondarily, I am pleased to present the report from the Highland Park Community Foundation. Through grants to for which I am the council liaison. Through grants to nonprofits, the Highland Park Community Foundation addresses unmet needs of our community and expands opportunities for all Highland Park and Highwood residents. The needs run the gamut, from early childhood programs and youth counseling services to college readiness assistance, support for seniors and programs for individuals with disabilities, affordable legal services and better food access, and other human services many residents simply cannot afford. In 2023, the foundation distributed over $1.1 million to help residents and improve the quality of life for everyone. This included $785,000 in annual grants and an additional $367,000 in grants strategically allocated to address ongoing challenges faced by residents affected by the Highland Park shooting. In addition to its grants in recent years, the foundation has offered other resources to the nonprofits that serve our community. Through partnerships with First Bank of Highland Park and Highland Park Chamber of Commerce, yet again, it has organized 6 nonprofit seminars, with the 7th scheduled for later this year. The foundation also continuously shares helpful information to assist its grantees in their work and facilitates connections among them by hosting biannual gatherings. Finally, each year, the foundation sponsors 3 special awards: the Golden Apple Award, which recognizes excellence in teaching; the Personal Achievement Award, which recognizes the exceptional efforts of a graduating Highland Park High School senior to overcome challenges; and the Jack Blaine Community Service Award, which recognizes extraordinary service in our community. The foundation has 3 boards: a governing board, an advisory council, and an associate leadership council. There are currently 22 governing board members who establish policy, make strategic decisions, and oversee the organization's activities. 11 members serve on the advisory council, and the majority of whom are previous board members. The Associate Leadership Council is comprised of 11 members who eagerly support the foundation's initiatives and raise awareness about the foundation among a younger demographic of our community. The board's executive director is Terry Olean, who's here with us tonight. The board's annual Fun and Casual Gather for Good fundraiser will take place on Friday, September 20th this year. I think I would be remiss to give you the structural explanation of the foundation without describing the care and sentiment which goes into the grant making, analysis, and actually care beyond fiduciary responsibility, which this organization brings to bear. In the aftermath of the July 4th shooting, we saw as a community the foundation step in and step up. Their sensitivity and depth really came into play as they helped our community to heal, collected and administered funds supporting victims, families, and all of us. Their professionalism coupled with care truly reflects who and what the foundation is capable of. Much more information is available at their website, which is www.hpcfil.org. If individuals have questions, they can contact the director, Terry Olean, at her email or at 433-4100. She's incredibly responsive, as you can tell by being here tonight, and works day and night every day.
Thank you, Councilmember Lidwar. Did you want to say anything, Terry, or just hello? Thanks for joining us this evening. Councilmember Stone?
Thank you. Continuing with all of the environmental on the agenda today, I wanted to mention that the City of Highland Park is going to be celebrating with Arbor Day with an annual event on the 27th of April from 9 to 11 a.m. at Ravinia Festival's West parking lot, which I'm sure will be brought up at the next meeting by staff. But I wanted to mention that we're going to have an EV car show in conjunction with Arbor Day this year. And we are currently looking for people who have electric vehicles that they want to bring, and they can then talk with people who are looking for electric vehicles about what it's like to be an EV owner and driver. So if you're interested in that, I have some materials here that I will be giving to Assistant City Manager Jason, and there's information on the website of, I believe on this, in conjunction with the Arbor Day, or no? So there's information on the city website, there's information on Go Green Highland Park's website, which is gogreenhp.org.
Thank you. Councilmember Tapia?
Yeah, on a different topic, you know, I still feel uneasy about the seemingly unresolved issues around Councilmember Hubler's status, as well as this ordinance that has generated a lot of debate. So rather than a prepared speech, I'm going to speak from the corazón, from the heart, because this, I think, is affecting many of us personally. And I speak particularly on behalf of the many in our city, our residents, our business owners that are feeling confused, frustrated, even angry, and about the situation. But I think it's a greater amount of frustration with us here in City Council that we're at a stalemate, that we have not provided a clear way forward, that it remains unresolved. And I think we, as a leadership body, are not really doing our responsibility. And I think that weighs heavily. And I you know, count myself as part of the leadership body that is failing to serve our residents. I think we have a Gordian knot here, and we're having a hard time unraveling it. I think our good legislation and legislating, it means that we have to find a way to unravel when things that seem to be intersecting and creating a seemingly unresolvable knot to untie. And so we have to kind of do it thread by thread. And I think we have to find the different lanes to resolve the different issues that do intersect with each other, but that have their own lanes. I think there's one lane, which is the actual ordinance, that regardless of the particulars on the dais here, there is an ordinance that was uncovered that is problematic. And a lot of people have found it to be outdated, and you know all the arguments around that. I think that is a legitimate lane to explore on its own merits, regardless of who sits on the dais, because it really seems to not be relevant to today's situation. The second lane that I would venture is some confusion, uncertainty about what is a conflict of interest. And it's been evident from the dais that, and even with legal counsel giving some guidance, others giving some interpretation, I think that is a legitimate thing for us to sort out. It's important in our responsibility to the city to be very clear about what is a conflict of interest and what is not, and for us to be trained and equipped and wise about managing that. And to that point, we will be having some conversations with the help of legal counsel to do that. That's a separate lane. And the third lane is that there have been some concerns about some ethics or some behaviors or some crossing the lines. You know, we always take those seriously, and there should be a separate lane for that, to really address that and put the facts, whatever the facts may be, and debate it on its own merits. But I think we've conflated the three things, and that's what leads us to the stalemate, the paralysis. And so I would urge us to really think about, you know, separating those things, addressing each of these issues on their own merits, in their own lanes, in their own jurisdictions, and in their own issues. You know, I know that there was a letter sent by the business owners, you know, today, actually, that I perceived, I think they're going to even read it, And, they're dealing with the issue, the first one. They are concerned about the ordinance and the impact on them, and I'll let them explain what they wrote to us about. But I think that's worth listening to in the context of that lane. I also think that regarding this ordinance, there is the will of the people, and several people have made really good arguments in the last few meetings about, people knew about a liquor license owner who ran for government and city council and got elected, and, the case for the will of the people respecting it and the sort of the what is in the public interest. I think we got to listen to what is in the public interest, and the arguments for that have been made very well. And then finally, I think that we, as city council, have taken pride, and the councils before us and those that have been here much longer than me, the Highland Park takes pride in having been a leader on the assault weapons ban, a leader on not prohibiting cell phone use while driving, and many other ways. So when we say that, well, there's only very few jurisdictions that have rescinded this ordinance when it's with their prerogative, and maybe we should follow the majority, that does not sit right with me. That does not, convey a sense of we have an opportunity to lead again on a topic that on its own merit seems to warrant a good, robust discussion. So with that, I think we need to be looking out for the best interests of our community. Our community is hurting, and that brings me back to my opening point. I run in many different circles here in Highland Park, and in every single one of the circles there is confusion and anger and frustration, and we have to listen to them. And regardless of what we got to work out here on each of these lanes, let's free up our citizens from the angst and the uncertainty and the lack of confidence in our leadership and resolve this once and for all and really do some good legislation. So I think we should find a way out.
Thank you. Councilmember Bloomberg?
Thank you. I want to respond to that very briefly. I'm not going to relitigate what we talked about at the meeting when the matter was up for a vote. And I certainly respect what my colleague has had to say. I understand people feel passionately about this, but they feel passionately on both sides of the issue. Typically, when we vote on things on the dais, we have an opportunity to have questions answered and to do it in a deliberate way. We did not have that opportunity because of what was perceived as an urgency. I think that I explained that as the fundamental part of my position last time. There are a number of ways out of this. There are ways to address this. There are a lot of questions that I have with respect to the letter that we received, which may be read to us tonight, I think. There were a number of good points that were made that I have thought about as well. But there are a lot of assumptions that we've made regardless of which side we voted on. And rather than making assumptions, it's important to base our decision upon facts, upon information, and understanding what we're going to do. Nobody is up here trying to hurt anybody in the public or trying to do something that we do not feel is best for the city of Highland Park. So with that in mind, again, I agree that it is important to resolve this issue, but to do it in a way that we typically pass or amend ordinances on the city council, and that's what I'm looking forward to.
Thank you. Sure.
I'd also like to chime in, and I appreciate the heartfelt pain and thoughtfulness of my fellow council members and of all of you here tonight. I would like to say that over the last few weeks and even since our last meeting, I have heard from so many citizens, and I don't mind, they've all come to me with open letters and comments, and I'm very grateful to them for that. And frankly, the letter that you all are about to hear from the restaurateurs really struck me because part of the biggest issue for me has to do with discrimination with a little d, which is in any way to disfranchise the ability of any of our residents to run for public office, being a really offensive thing to me as a first-generation American, who the most important thing to my parents, who were both not born here, was when they got their citizenship, their ability to vote, and then the first time they ever saw me sworn into a public office. And it was really a big deal, and I think it is. And the other thing is, I think that when someone realizes what they can't have or didn't even know they didn't have the right to. It's a very troubling thing to feel as a resident and in terms of inclusivity in our town to feel that. So that's part of what I feel. I do agree, and I said it at the last meeting, and I'd like to repeat it. I think this council is on the way because we are having a meeting regarding our ethics in early April. At the Committee of the Whole, we are going to discuss what are the responsibilities, what would make people more comfortable with perhaps changing this law. And I think in order to bring peace and some sense of semblance to voters who may even feel somewhat disenfranchised, depending on what occurs with this, that to have a revote very shortly thereafter, if not a meeting after, when we feel that we have enough information, is really important. And part of that really has to do, and I requested this of staff and council last meeting, and I just want to reiterate, we need to know what other towns have done. So many of these towns did not know that this was on the books. That's no one's fault. The mistakes that were made in so many measures, there's no finger pointing. It's not about that. They didn't know. But now that we do know, the question is whether this is applicable in today's world and how we go on and lead from here and heal from here. Because I too have heard so much pain and so much anger, and I don't think that's good for our town. So I would just urge that we forward with more information, and I'm glad we have the Committee of the Whole set up with regard to ethics, and I hope we will reconsider this issue very shortly.
Thank you. Any other business from the council? I'll just add my points, which are that I too look forward to our conversation regarding ethics and specifically talking about and clarifying what is a conflict of interest. And while many towns, as noted by Councilmember Littler, may not know, there are plenty that do know that this law is on their books and have taken it one step further and have added tobacco and cannabis to the licenses also that are precluded from being held by people who are on their city councils. So I just want to clarify that point. But thank you. And I want to be clear to this group that when we do talk about ethics and conflict of interest, that will be the subject matter. We will be discussing that broadly as it applies to people who serve on this council, serve on our commissions. We won't be talking about an amendment to the liquor code at that conversation. So I just want to be clear that that's what will be on the agenda. And with that, business from city staff.
The omnibus agenda is temporary lease agreement for our temporary seat, 770 Deerfield Road. A variety of different programs currently underway at that location. Public to over and wealth of information, senior center programming, and we do want to extend special appreciation to the Archdiocese for allowing us to lease this space on a temporary location while the senior center at 1201 Park is under renovation. And then the second item is number 7, pertaining to murals. As the council knows, an ordinance was presented and approved by the city council. This amendment that is on your agenda this evening pertains to refining those regulations. But I understand there's one Councilmember Ross, who has expressed an interest in an amendment to the document that's on the agenda this evening. So she's recommending that that be pulled for discussion. And then just 2 other important points. We're going to be setting information out this week to businesses in the downtown district pertaining to the 2nd Street parking lot project. That project is going to start on March 18th, and tentatively we anticipate being done by May 17th. So we are going to continue with our public communication as well as direct communication to those businesses and property owners in the area. And then another exciting project that is going to be underway early this spring season is our 2nd Street improvement project. So we are currently out to bid for that infrastructure investment, with bids anticipating to be received in the next month. And then on the next agenda, we'll have a recommended contract award for that project. Infrastructure investment is one of the city's top priorities. We have $34 million planned in capital projects this year, and we encourage the public to go to our website, and if you go under construction projects and our capital plan, you can see the wealth of different projects that are currently underway and planned for this year. And then our next meeting is scheduled for April 8th. There is a possibility it may be postponed to the 10th. We will get confirmation this week and certainly post that to our website.
Great, thank you. Our next item on the agenda is business from the public. This is an opportunity for members of the public to address the city council on a topic that is within the city's purview and jurisdiction, but is not listed on another location on the agenda. If you'd like to speak about a matter that is listed on the agenda, we ask that you wait until that agenda item is called, and we'll give you an opportunity to speak then. If your matter is omnibus consent agenda, that's items 1 through 8, please let us know if you'd like us to pull that matter from the consolidated list so that you can speak about it. Please be aware that business from the public is not intended to be a forum for open dialogue or engagement with members of the city council. Rather, it is intended as an opportunity to make comments to the city council. Please do not expect a response from anyone tonight. If appropriate, we may direct the city manager or other city staff to respond to questions or issues raised at a later date. All comments should be directed to the city council. All speakers will be limited to 3 minutes. We request that the public not applaud or make other comments after any speaker. And most importantly, we ask that everyone be respectful, civil, and non-repetitive. Good evening, Mr. Lambert. Correct. I always know your name. Thank you.
I'm bringing up a subject that I just learned in the last few days, that on Valencia Street, there was a sex trafficking event, and all the people involved with it were illegal aliens coming from other countries. And if it weren't for the police that we have, the excellent police, this may not have been taken care of promptly. Now, in the same subject, sex trafficking involving girls 10 years old, 12 years old, 15 years old is not something to think about lightly. When they become pregnant, they're taken to Planned Parenthood with their person who is in charge. Some people call him a pimp. That person now pretends he's somebody else. Nobody recognizes the fact that this poor girl, the reason that she's brought there, because she's no use when she's pregnant. They need somebody who is not pregnant to perform all of these horrible acts. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any other business from the public?
Hello. Thank you for allowing me the opportunity to speak today. My name is Alex, and I'm a resident of University Avenue. I moved to Highland Park back in 2021 with my wife and our 2 beautiful baby boys. I sent it before you to express my concerns and opposition to the proposed sidewalk installation project on our beloved University Avenue. My wife and I have 2 children. Our first son is 6 years old and attends Wayne Thomas School. My wife often walks with him to school, and she has never felt it was dangerous to traverse University Avenue. It is important to highlight that our area has not witnessed any car accident, underscoring the effectiveness of existing measures and the cautious behavior of our drivers. The introduction of a sidewalk may not only alter the characteristic of our neighborhood, but could also imply a solution to a problem that does not exist. We moved into our first house as a young family, knowing that we didn't have any sidewalks and the minimal traffic with cautious driving is a norm. We love our small street and don't see the need for introducing unnecessary structure. I was born and raised in Korea. I moved to US in 2007 when I was 21. I have lived in various places, experienced different landscapes, cultures, and communities throughout my life. I can say that what we have in Highland Park offers is an extremely unique and beautiful thing that is important to preserve. Not many places in the world have this beautiful unification of people and nature. I feel it's crucial to preserve this landscape, and any short-sighted movement toward a modernizing city should be reevaluated. As many people from University Avenue who agrees with me have said already, there is no clear goal or problem to solve with these initiatives. Ultimately, it feels like one person's idea is jeopardizing what deserves to be preserved and has been upheld over time. Lastly, I would like to express my dissatisfaction with how poorly the city is executing its agenda. I won't reiterate how biased the survey sent to University Avenue resident was, as another gentleman has already provided evidence of its bias 2 weeks ago. The initial survey letter and how it is being interpreted have made me lose confidence in the city's ability to make a fair and informed decision for its citizens. I remember the issue was about the format of the questionnaire. I would like to go one step further and address how the votes were counted. As an affected resident, I'm troubled by the fact that the city conducted the same survey with non-affected residents and weighted their votes the same as those of who affected residents without disclosing who they are. How do we know who these people are? These individuals don't live on the University Avenue, so why should they make decisions for my street and property? The negative favor of affected resident vote is apparent, and the city or whoever is running this project should reconsider bringing this agenda to the table. I've heard that this is not the first time the city has attempted this to us. I believe the city has many other problems to prioritize, and now I wonder who is benefiting from this unwanted project.
Thank you, thank you,
Yep.
thank you. Did you want to respond, City Manager? Or? Sure.
Happy to. Thank you. I greatly appreciate it. I'll address a couple of your comments, and I just want to direct your attention to Director Ron Bannon, our Public Works Director. If you want to have a one-on-one conversation with him after, he can just get into a little bit more detail. So we did send out we mailed letters to those properties that would be directly impacted along University Avenue in the event there was a sidewalk. So on both sides of the street, and then we did general public at large inviting feedback. So the survey results allows us just to get a gauge of whether or not there is interest, and that information is reviewed by staff and then provided to the city council. When we documented the results, we did identify those people that are impacted, and those would be if there were a sidewalk in front of your home, as well as the community. At this point, we are advancing to study, which would also include a landscape and tree assessment. So that project is going to be underway, and we will follow up once we have all that technical information. So there'll be more information that people can actually review and make a more informed decision on. And we will seek public input once again for that. Again, break down the results based on those impacted and not impacted. And then we will provide the advisory group and eventually the city council. So we have outlined what we have done thus far. That's all fully transparent on the city's website, as well as our next steps. And anyone interested in being kept apprised of this initiative, they're welcome to email us, add them to a project contact list. And so we'll provide you direct information as well as communication through the general e-news as well for the general population.
Great, thank you, thank you. Any other business from the public this evening? Okay, please come forward.
Hi, my name is Rebecca Nemro, and I'm a 13-year-old. I attend Northwood Middle School, and I'm in the dual language program. I live on University Avenue, and it is essential that we get sidewalks. Firstly, my mom's dad unfortunately passed away 11 days before I was born because she was hit by a car from not having sidewalks accessible to her. Secondly, in order for me to learn to ride a bike, I had to go to Centennial to be able to learn to ride instead of being able to learn on my own street. Another reason is because there are many children on University who could run out onto the street and go for walks with their family, but if they didn't have a sidewalk, there's a lot of danger. The main reason, though, is for safety. More elderly people and children and anybody who has a disability can have a lot of trouble navigating the street, especially if they have canes or wheelchairs. Recently, my mom hurt her ankle and was in a wheelchair and hit a pothole and flew out of her wheelchair. This could also happen with newborns and strollers. Some might argue that their property will be cut off, but if you look at the outline, it is very clear that most plants and trees are strictly avoided. This is why it is key to have sidewalks on University Avenue.
Thank you, Rebecca. Business from the public, come forward.
Thank you. And I apologize for the risk of repetition. Hello, my name is Maddie Holub, and I would like to offer a few thoughts as a new resident of University Avenue. I grew up in Highland Park, but have lived outside of Illinois for the last 15 years. Living in different climates made me truly appreciate Highland Park's mature overstory, winding ravine system, and access to our wonderful Great Lake. For the past 10 years, until this past August, my wife Amanda, myself, and our 9-month-old daughter Luna lived in Boulder, Colorado. While blessed with sunny and pleasant winters, Boulder summers could be oppressively hot and dry. Boulder, being a high desert climate, lacks the temperate deciduous overstory we benefit from here in Highland Park. The benefits of shade and cooling provided by mature trees cannot be overstated, especially in our rapidly warming world. Thus, one of the major considerations in our decision to leave Colorado was a desire to live on a tree-lined street with all its associated benefits. Presented that opportunity. I'm here tonight because my family and I are concerned about the impacts of the proposed sidewalk project on University Ave and Old Trail. We are concerned about this project going ahead without proper study of what the actual extent and impact of tree loss would be for the neighborhood. Thank you for the heads up. Further, I find it alarming that the city considers non-responses in the survey regarding this project to be votes in favor of the project. I feel it is important to add that the street we lived on in Boulder, and many of the streets in our neighborhood for that matter, did not have sidewalks. There were, however, plenty of families with young children and also plenty of stop signs. Will the city be offering multiple options to address the perceived issues necessitating sidewalks on University and Old Trail? Could stop signs address the cost to the taxpayer and without the loss of trees and property associated with sidewalk construction? As a new resident and an old one of Highland Park, I am interested to see how city projects unfold. I hope that the outcome of this proposed project will reflect the desires of the actually affected residents and that the process for determining interest in the project is carried out honestly. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I am here for my children and for the children on our street whose parents mostly could not be here tonight because they were putting them to sleep or driving around in circles, as the case may be.
Please state your name for the record.
Oh, and I'm Allison Nemero. I live on University Avenue. My kids have been exposed to far too many, as have most Highland Park kids, nightmares that are now realities for them. And there's tragedies that we can't control, and there's ones that we can. And University Avenue is an accident waiting to happen. As my daughter said, my mother-in-law died 5 days before she was born because she was hit by a car at a slow pace in a slow-moving area. And guess what happened within days after? Sidewalks got installed. My parents, when pushing strollers, me when pushing strollers, we've been run off the street so many times. I've had to stop for some of the neighbors here to let them go by while cars speed by. I'm not asking for, a new parking lot or anything extreme. I'm just saying that kids should be allowed to go outside and walk to their friends' houses without the parents having to fear their safety. We're saying I've had babysitters that I didn't let walk my children to the park because I didn't feel like they were safe. Unfortunately, I'm all too familiar with the effectiveness of a squeaky wheel. The last time we considered sidewalks, when I asked neighbors why they voted against sidewalks, they told me that they didn't want 30 trees to be removed. And as a lifelong Highland Park resident, I happen to know that Highland Park would never allow 30 trees to get torn down just for some sidewalks. Sheridan Road and Linden and all the most beautiful streets in Highland Park have big, beautiful trees and they have sidewalks. And every time we drive down them, my kids say, why do they get sidewalks and we don't? And I don't have a good answer for them. And I'm kind of tired of having to talk about it. It's not easy to come here at 7:30 at night. But I want you to know that my opinion reflects many on our street who just can't be here. I have encouraged them to send their emails. I don't know if that's a valid submission or not. I hope that Highland Park believes there's nothing more important than public safety. So yeah, our street is pretty, but I think the trees and the neighbors are even prettier when kids can play safely, when our neighbors can walk their dogs. I have a neighbor that was not able to be here tonight, whose house is full of the pollinator plants and loves monarch butterflies, and I'm thrilled that my kids got to hear about all of the sustainable efforts, because they're like, we got to do that. So thank you for all your hard work and for all your dedication to Highland Park, and we appreciate you. I could go on and on. Thanks.
Public wish to be heard.
My name is Larry Walters, and I live on University Avenue. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak to everyone in the council. I'd like to say that I am Allison's neighbor, 2 doors down. I have 3 lovely daughters, and they're right here too, except they're getting ready for bed. And I don't want sidewalks. So the comments about all my neighbors want sidewalks, absolutely not. I have a 9, 7, and 5-year-old that learned how to ride bicycles this summer. All 3, boom, 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 up and down University Avenue. Sometimes you'll even see us riding a motorcycle sidecar throughout Highland Park. An orange one, you'll know it's me. But I just wanted to, my 75-year-old young senior citizen mom lives with us. Up until October, a 15-year-old Shepherd Lab. I walked several times up and down University, both ways, lots of times. Never have felt fear. Don't feel fear today. My 3 kids, scooter ride, bicycle ride, walk. We go to the park all the time. I wasn't prepared, but I wanted to share my thoughts as I'm a constituent. And although I may have not walked up to you and said hello, you would have my vote and wouldn't even know it. I saw very nice Councilmember Yummy Ross at the Highland Park Arts Center last week, and I wanted to say hi, but she was busy. She was with attending the Arts Center and speaking to people, and I just didn't have a chance. But you may not know that we voted for you, and because we're not vocal about wanting a sidewalk, but you have our votes, we voted for you, and we would like our voices to be heard too. Although I never thought that that was going to be an issue. I'll touch on one subject too. When I bought in 2019, which was December of 2019, in my mailbox, before we even moved in, were letters about the sidewalks. It was so contentious. I was like, what is this about? I want nothing to do with this because I'm just barely getting my feet in. But I'll tell you, the people that put letters in my mail, they were all for sidewalks. They were all pushing for it. I didn't even have my bearings. So it's that hard, the marketing and the pushing, and I understand you probably feel it. So I'll share some quick points. I have a young family and a young senior that you already know about. Everyone in my family feels safe. We do come from real estate. We own real estate all the way throughout Illinois. And I'll tell you that sidewalks require more care as far as shoveling and salting, and which may also kill some of our lawns next to it. Now, we're thinking about adding concrete sidewalks that surely do deteriorate, crack, and lift. And we will no doubt be waiting upon repairs to those sidewalks in the near future. I really feel it's needless expenditures. When I moved in 2019, the sidewalks were, the street was pretty bad, but thank you all very much for having it fixed. It's beautiful. I don't feel that the people that don't live on our street should have as much a decision as those of us that live on the street. We might as well ask someone from Madison, Wisconsin. And, we bought our house in 2019, the way that it is, and we like it the way it is. We're new. We want to be here. I'll be here for 30 years until that house is paid off or more. And
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And like Andres Tapia said, I'm also speaking de corazón. Thank you very much.
Thank you, thank you. Any other members of the public? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Iris Dalawong. I am a Highland Park resident. I also own Ruby of Simon. I'm also a substitute teacher for District 112. I was chosen from the Highland Park as a business owner because this does affect me as well. I have a letter right here. I also want to run for public office as well down the road. So I am just going to read what the letter said. This letter is a direct plea for immediate action, for change, and for the protection of the vibrancy and diversity of our downtown and our city as a whole. Your leadership in recent years has been nothing short of inspirational during some very challenging times. We're appealing to the exact spirit of community and progressiveness which we admire in you. We represent the present and future restaurant owners of Highland Park, specifically HP residents who hold liquor licenses as part of our basic function in the community. We are a small but vitally important voice in the town. Recent events have shed light on a largely unknown and glaringly inconsistent inequity that we hope you can correct. Our voices are being muffled. Highland Park's restaurants and eateries are more than just local spots to break bread or have a drink to unwind. They are forums for debate and discussion and are the birthplace of ideas that move our community forward and attract new visitors and residents. Beyond being a major economic driver and a source of much-needed sales tax revenue for the city, our establishments are places where people add their voices to the fabric of Highland Park. Those voices are important, and we hear them on a daily basis. We also represent a segment of the population that employs and empowers people in all walks of life and all ethnic backgrounds and beliefs. We uniquely represent the people of Highland Park precisely because we instantly have our fingers on the pulse of so many things that matter in this town. Chapter 119 of the city's code regarding alcoholic beverages, specifically section 119.320, approval or denial of application, essentially states that no citizen who runs a profit business and who holds a liquor license shall be allowed to serve on our city council. While we understand the origins of this Prohibition-era legislation, it's time to update the law, as nearly a dozen other local communities have done. It's time to give us and our successors the ability to have a voting voice. It matters unrelated to alcohol. Being able to vote and hold public office is a fundamental right that comes with being an American citizen. While we certainly appreciate the opportunity to sit on a local commission and freely engage in public debate, we demand full representation and the ability to have a seat at the most important table in town, the City Council. New and existing small business operators must be given the same rights as any other business owners in Highland Park. We demand the ability to vote on matters important to everyone, now and in the future. The issue is much larger than alcohol. With vast amounts of money being spent by the City of Highland Park to attract new restaurants and to enhance the existing ones, it is utterly preposterous that those same restaurants are currently denied the ability to vote at such matters. And if those votes should relate to alcohol, a recusal would be issued. This is no different than any other potential conflicts of interest in small towns governed by residents. And my last point, in the community as a progressive and diverse Highland Park in the year 2024, denying restaurant owners with liquor license the ability to vote on the council is inconsistent with modern times. Restaurant owners and others who hold liquor licenses deserve the same rights afforded to real estate developers, owners of marijuana dispensaries or tobacco or prescription drug products.
Thank you, thank you. Feel free to give the rest of your letter to the clerk. We did receive it, we've read it, and we appreciate you coming this evening and reading it into the record. Appreciate it. Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to be heard?
My name is Jean Sogan. I'm speaking for the leadership team of the Highland Park and Highwood League of Women Voters. We want to tell you about a study that we're contemplating. We'd like to look at issues pertaining to our city's current controversy over who is eligible to serve on the city council. No recommendation would come out of this study. It's our hope that a nonpartisan league study on this issue would give everyone a common set of facts. We hope to line up our volunteers in the next month and complete our study by August. That's lightning fast by league standards, but we hope that it would be fast enough to be helpful. And if you'd like to talk to anyone on the leadership team of the league, you know who we are, actually. We'd be delighted. And the reason we didn't bring this up before is that we really, it's just like it happened fast for you, it happened fast for us, and it was just recently that the leadership team could talk about it and say, we think it would be helpful to do a nonpartisan study on this. We think we can help on soothing the troubled waters. With a completely different hat, I want to add something about University Avenue. As you know, I've been involved with the Historic Preservation Commission for a long time, and you'll be delighted to know that the reason we have a street called University Avenue and a street called College Place in the Highlands is that in the 20s, when Edith Rockefeller McCormick and Kren and Dado were developing the area, they thought, won't it be great to cordon off a section of the Highlands and have it only be available for people who have university degrees? And for those of you who don't know, what their development company did was they platted the streets and they platted the lots, and they only built about 11 houses, and then they sold a few more lots, but they did almost nothing, but they gave a great deal of thought to how this imaginary town would be for them. So there's a section for college educated. That's it. Thank you.
Jean.
Real quickly, I want to note that Jean led a bike tour in the Highlands last year, so anyone here from university may want to take a look. I believe it's on the city website, possibly. We looked at a bunch of historic homes in that area, so you can take a look at that information from Jean.
Thank you.
I'll make it very brief. I live on University. My name is Marla. I know most of you have seen me. I just want to say that tonight, with all the proclamations with regards to the environment, which are wonderful, I hope you keep that in mind when you vote on the university project with regards to not having sidewalks. Because no matter what anybody says, I truly believe after 2 hours and an architect have come by, I know that other people say that it's not. I'm not saying this because I believe it. I'm saying it because I was informed. So I hope you consider that. We're a tree city, and we're very concerned about the environment and keeping it green. And I hope you consider that because we are an environmental city. Thank you very much.
Members of the public wishing to be heard, come forward if you do. Thank you.
My name is I'm 13 years old, and I lived here for about like 9 years. And the amount of times I've seen like cars speeding by on my street is like a lot. And considering there's like a lot of children on my street, it's necessary that we have sidewalks so that we don't harm them. And they should be able to have like safety and be able to play on the street and like do normal stuff without being at risk of getting hit by like cars. Madeline Houlihan. Madeline Houlihan.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Any other members of the public? Hi.
Hi, my name is Jory Houlihan. I am her mom. We live at 3480 University. First, thank you so much for listening. I have to admit, I didn't really think about the importance of sidewalks when we bought our home on University in 2015. I learned pretty quickly that I should have. Just trying to walk my son to school was, well, it was interesting. Being flipped off in front of my kid was not what I pictured about moving when I thought about living here. I know many people feel that sidewalks aren't necessary. And a lot of those people say, well, we raised our kids here without them, and we never had an issue. Most of those people raised their kids before there were cell phones, before 2-car garages were the norm, not the exception. We actually still have quite a few 1-car garages on our street, before people were so distracted. I have had to dodge cars on University more than I should. We have a lot of new families with young kids on this street, and I worry so much. One woman who was new to University asked in a neighborhood Facebook group if it was normal to have to dive out of the way of cars on University when she was pushing her stroller with her baby in it. University is a narrow street. People do speed a lot, contrary to what studies have shown. And then when the landscaping trucks are there, it's just like a nightmare. There's no safe way for the kids to just walk to school. And every kid in that neighborhood should have a safe way to walk to school. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.
Also live on University. Sidewalk talk this evening. I moved with my husband and two. My oldest is 6 and a kindergartner at Wayne Tom. He just learned to ride his bike, and my 3-year-old inherited his training wheel bike, and they both love to ride their bikes, yet are terrified to do it in our street. There's no way to get out of the street on your bike. And instead, we put their bikes in our car and drive them elsewhere. And I feel our kids should be able to safely ride their bikes in front of their own home. They should be able to walk to school, and instead we have to drive to school because it takes way too long as they're walking, and they continually, they're really good about it, but they have to jump into the grass and look over their shoulder and move out of the way as cars are going by, and some are speeding and some are not, but regardless, the streets are narrow. I understand we all love trees. I also really love my children, and I'm here for their safety over some trees, sadly. Further, there's a lot of turnover on our street. On my block alone, have 6 people that have moved in, 6 families since I moved in, and all have young children that will promise within the next 3 years. And we aren't allowed the opportunity to ride the bus without paying a fee because we are so close. So please, I ask you to help us get a sidewalk in here for the safety of my children and several other children on our street.
Thanks. Any other members of the public wishing to be heard?
Well, good evening. My name is Jim Lederer. I own a restaurant, Bluegrass. We don't have sidewalks in front. No. It's ironic that, 20 years ago I came to this community as I grew up here, started a wonderful business. In '72, the community was dry. Now all of a sudden, everything is changing. And I think it's a good time for us to change with the, once again, city looking to invest in restaurants. I think it's a great idea, although I think that there are better ways of having somebody at the table to help you elicit the best type of restaurants to build a community around. Smaller restaurants add to the vibrancy, add to a little more community, which is something that this area is missing. And what I bring to this community, I'd like to see more smaller players come into town, and you could give away less money and get a lot more money for your dollar. And I just think that as we don't have a business person per se on the council, I think that's a very, very important part of the discussion for how we move it forward or how you move it forward. And as none of the restaurants were really brought to fruition as far as what the city was planning on doing, once again, I'm happy to see more restaurants come to town, but I like to see a different perspective as far as how we grow the community, for the community. Thank you.
Just want to share with you, we had a great conversation at the Committee of the Whole, and I believe it's on videotape. So if you'd like to see, that's more about helping existing restaurants and as well as new businesses. So would love for you to watch that. And as Councilmember Ross noted, we're having this conversation April 17th, which I hope that you'll be at. And we have not finished the conversation around how we plan to assist our local restaurants, our smaller restaurants. So I would love for your participation, I know at that meeting, but also come join us at the committee of the whole that follows that meeting, because that will be when we're firming up the plans. But specifically, everybody said, we want to hear from the restaurants. We don't want to make this out of whole cloth and then come to you. And I did want to just confirm one thing. We do have several business people on this council, so appreciate.
Small business.
Yes.
Small businesses, small
Yes.
local businesses.
Yes, yes, you do. So happy to have your comments, and always great to see you, Jim.
Okay.
Thank you. Any other members of the public wishing to be heard? Going once, going twice. All right, we will move to our scheduled business. Items 1 through 8 have been grouped together for omnibus consideration. I'm going to be pulling item 7, as Councilmember Ross would like to say a few words. So I'm seeking a motion to approve items 1 through 6 and 8.
Second.
Comments from the council on those items? Any from the public? Will the clerk please call the vote?
Councilmember Ross.
Aye.
Councilmember Tapia.
Aye.
Councilmember Littlewer.
Aye.
Councilmember Stone. Councilmember Bloomberg.
Aye.
Mayor Rotering.
Aye, 6 ayes, no nays. Items 1 through 6 and 8 have been approved. Item 7 is an ordinance amending Chapter 105 of the Highland Park City Code of 1968 as amended, art murals. Councilmember Ross.
Thank you, Mayor. For the sake of public information, I already contacted our city manager about this, and she's aware of language that I would like to see added to the notice to the neighborhood regarding a meeting to discuss any mural. I would ask that we add language to what is required for it, so that under the neighborhood notice, it doesn't just say, the notice is on page 225 of the packet. And
Councilmember, could I
Yes.
just interrupt you one second? Just for a little bit more clarity. So it's section 105.130 neighborhood meeting, and then letter C, content of notice.
Thank you, content of notice, thank you for that. Included in the content of notice that's required is 1, a depiction of the art mural proposal, 2, the neighborhood meeting location, date, and time, of course, and number 3 is a site plan, and I'm not sure whether this is 3 or 4, but it says a building or structure elevation. 4, okay, thank you, it's number 4, a building or structure elevation. And currently it says structural elevation or photograph showing the location and size of the proposed art mural. And I would like to, I'm suggesting that it be not or, but and, a building or structure elevation and multiple photographs to show context that depict the location, size, and scale of the proposed art mural. I think that more fully captures, if we're having a neighborhood meeting, it's better information. Thank you.
Okay.
Can I move to approve that as amended?
Second.
Any comments or questions on any of that? Any from the public? Will the clerk please call the vote?
Councilmember Ross.
Aye.
Councilmember Tapia.
Aye.
Councilmember Littlewer.
Aye.
Councilmember Stone. Councilmember Bloomberg. Mayor Rotering.
Aye, 6 ayes, no nays. Item 7 as amended, approved. Item 9 is an ordinance amending a special use permit for a planned unit development at 555 Roger Williams Avenue. And I'll just note that item 10 is a resolution approving a fourth amendment to a development agreement at 555 Roger Williams Avenue. Joel?
currently here on ordinance, special use permit, and plan unit development, and a resolution. Wow. A little bit of background. So 555 Roger Williams Avenue is formerly 515 Roger Williams Avenue. The applicant submitted an application January 19th of this year with a request for off-street parking modification for first floor commercial spaces and design review. If appropriate, council may adopt an ordinance approving the off-street parking relief that is in your packet, as well as the resolution authorizing the execution of the Fourth Amendment to the development agreement. The applicant had requested that these two items be provided prospectively ahead of your meeting, as they have interested tenants in spaces here. Commission recommendation. The Plan and Design Commission held a public hearing February 20th, continued it to March 5th, and discussed this matter. 2 residents provided testimony in opposition to the request. And on March 5th, 2024, the commission voted 3-1 to recommend approval with conditions. Of approval included conditions related to parking spaces, lighting, and signage improvements. For the parking spaces, the applicant must provide not less than 18 off-street parking spaces for non-residential uses which are permitted in the B2RW district. The emphasis there is added by staff. So that's the collection of uses within the overlay district that encompasses the Ravinia business district. As far as lighting, there were some lighting changes that were precipitated by a commissioner who, on the PDC, who had requested that that be improved to aid the patrons of the uses in that space, finding the parking behind the building. And there we have conditions related to 2. One related to the color correlated temperature, 3,000 Kelvin, no higher than that. And then the other related to that the exterior lighting comply with our zoning code. So the applicant had supplied some cut sheets and information related to lighting that did not. Instead of having that slow down the application and the recommendation on the parking relief, the Plan and Design Commission thought just make that a condition of approval that it meets the code, and then there's no need to worry about it in terms of relief. Similarly with signage, there were some signage improvements that were asked for by the commission, and the applicant provided some informational or wayfinding signs that don't comply with code. So here too, we're looking at a condition that just essentially recites what the requirement is of the code. And so that's what would need to be resubmitted at time of building permit. Because they're not asking for the relief. They stipulated that they will comply with the code in both cases. In terms of parking, we've included in the packet a summary of the parking relief over time. Now, this project was quite a complicated project, and it dates back to 2015 March, as a matter of fact. So it's almost the anniversary date. It may actually be almost. And so the project started out back in 2015 and received relief for parking. Starting off, the parking requirement then of 78 spaces, given the composition of the building. And there is in our code, and still is today, the alternative transportation reduction as part of the PUD approval. So that relieved the development of 12 parking spaces required. And then additional parking relief was provided through the PUD or planned development approval of an additional 50 spaces. And you could see here as kind of a chronology of relief that has gone on with regard to this project. It's been before you several times. As I mentioned, it is a complicated project. It started out with a lease arrangement for parking that was technically off-site, not owned by the development, and that was later purchased and so then became part of the development. Thus, you see the reduction in the parking relief in the table and the 2019 line there. It goes from 2016, 51 down to 25. And then it bounced back up to 26 because we had a new use that was proposed in one of the tenant spaces that required more parking than was assumed for this development. And what I say by that is the development made assumptions about what the first floor or ground floor commercial space would be utilized. And the parking requirement was, at that time, the initial approval, the parking requirement for retail space. As we all know, the retail environment changed dramatically in the last 10 years, and retail is a lot more difficult to come by. And so that was the initial parking calculation. And so now there appears to be interest in restaurants in the remaining spaces, and that has a significantly higher parking requirement than retail. And the one space that did fill in the ground floor commercial did have a higher parking requirement as well by one space. Thus, you see the increase in the third column from 25 to 26. Just to remind council, and some on council weren't here for the initial approval, it still exists to this day as well. There is a back alley that cuts between the two properties. That is, technically, there's a partially owned portion of parking. So the parking spaces are half on-site, half off-site. So it might require, but they're physically there. So that's just important to keep mind of. So you'll see here in terms of the parking provided on site is 41, and that's what explains that. There's 10 spaces that are split. They're straddling land that's owned by the city, land that's in the alley back there, the right-of-way. So in terms of just a quick parking review, so right now we have 51 spaces total out there, 30 for residential use, 3 dedicated to ADA, 18 for ground floor commercial use, of which 3 are currently being used by the personal trainer / medical office tenant there, and 15 spaces remain available for other commercial uses. Restaurants, excluding dining and entertainment, that use requires 15 spaces per 1,000 square feet. It's one of the highest parking requirements in the parking table. So there's currently enough parking for a 1,000 square foot restaurant, not including areas such as the kitchen, bathroom, mechanical rooms, storage rooms, things like that, that you can deduct from parking requirements. So think of the dining area where patrons are sitting. Okay, and so in terms of relief, there are 18 spaces, 3 currently used by an existing tenant, 15 spaces available. We did not have floor plans provided as part of this application, so staff were not able to specifically make a call on what spaces can be deducted or not. We know that space will be deducted, however. So theoretically, the maximum additional relief for the entirety of the space on the first floor, the entirety of the space, including the place that is currently occupied by the personal trainer medical office, would be 63 spaces. But that's a theoretical number, and from that would be deductions based on restrooms, if there's kitchen areas, storage, things like that. So getting to the remaining space that's untenanted, and that's why there's a difference in the total square footage. The roughly 4,460 square feet, if that space were to be used for a restaurant, assuming that, 35 spaces, actually between 18 and 35 spaces would be required in terms of a relief at this time. Now, the numbers in parentheses. Yeah.
One quick question. That's in addition to the 26 spaces that they've already got relief from?
That's correct, and that's what I was just about to say. The numbers in parentheses show the total number of spaces of relief that have been granted over the course of the entire project.
Thank you.
We focused only on the incremental relief because that other relief has been approved in its entirety. But nonetheless, useful to know that context.
So the total number of spaces required currently, 60?
Well, so what I'm trying to say is they've already received relief for the spaces that they have relief for. So
Yeah, that, but the
this is
total
just the
number,
increment.
so they've got relief for 26 spaces, they've got 51 spaces currently, so, okay, So the additional spaces plus the 26 is almost as much as the total number required.
Right, so in this case, and remember, the parking required in this table has now changed, right? That's back from 2015, right? There was a different assumption on the uses, so I just point that out for the
And
consistency.
wasn't this originally intended to be a transit-oriented development, and in that realm, that's where we reduced the number of spaces that were
correct.
expected?
Correct, and so that is a very good point, Mayor. So yes, I had indicated here and said previously about the initial less the alternative transportation reduction. That is true, based on its transit the location of this development to transit, that was a deduction that was provided, and that's per code as part of the PUD process. So we took that, yes, that is, quote, relief, but it's relief captured in a way because of the location, right? So then the relief on top of that, or that more fungible relief, is the relief that then flows from there, the 50, the 51, then it went down to 25 and back up to 26.
Okay.
Okay, and so what we have here is an additional relief request that could vary depending on the layout of the space if you're going to use it as restaurant. So we're assuming that the remaining area of the building on the first floor would be restaurant. You can see here 18 to 35 spaces of additional relief would be needed. And why is there that range? Well, it depends on how it lays out, how large the kitchen is, things like that. So there are percentages here, assuming 25 to 50% of the space is deductible. So we would make that determination when we get that floor plan, and that would be then what the relief would be. But the applicant has asked for relief, not to a specific number, but just relief from parking in general. So it's still properly before you. You do generally see specific numbers of relief, but you don't necessarily have to. But it's up to council's discretion on what information is needed to make decisions on these matters.
Can I ask another?
Sure.
In order to go ahead with the current proposed program with this restaurant, no relief is requested. This is relief for prospective potential tenancies.
So we've been told through the public hearing process that there is a tenant that they have courted and seem to have, and that tenant could locate in this space with deductions, assumption for deductions. They could locate here because there's 15 spaces that have been unallocated, 1,000 square foot restaurant with the dining area that big could locate there. So the applicant has some information about that they'll share with you, and they believe that they need 14.7 spaces for that, but I don't want to steal their thunder on that.
Okay,
but yes, you're correct. They could do that now. But that would leave stranded the remaining space that is still unoccupied. I just point that out because they will have consumed the entirety of the parking relief that they've gotten. So that would be that remaining space would not be able to be occupied at all with any use.
But again, just to clarify, either they're going ahead with a program that's going to require about parking for about 1,000 square feet, or other than that, there's nothing definitive. And so for whatever is either planned prospectively or not planned, there isn't any immediate need for parking relief.
I would have to defer to the applicant, but my understanding is they have one tenant that could fit into the space that we talked about that has parking right now without additional relief need, but that would leave remaining space unoccupiable because of parking requirements.
Well, so the answer is yes. We don't need, there's no urgency to passing this tonight.
I would defer to the applicant. They requested that the ordinance and resolution be drafted ahead of your meeting tonight.
That would be great.
So
Thanks.
I would let them.
So I actually have a question as well. So thinking about this neighborhood, there are several public parking lots. There are several restaurants. None of them would meet the parking requirements that are being laid out for a new development. And again, this was a deliberative point that this was a transit-oriented residential building that had some retail space on the first floor. I guess my confusion stems from what seems like a new requirement, but every other business in this neighborhood doesn't have to meet that requirement. So I guess I need clarity.
Yeah, so the pre-existing businesses in the neighborhood do not, that's correct. And they can re-tenant under the repark rule and continue to operate, that is correct.
Mayor,
The reason why this particular item is before you, though, is because this has never been tenanted. So it's essentially its first relief, okay? So it's like, consider it like a new development in that way. Initially, it was proposed to be retail, and now it's changing to a different use. So that was not really contemplated. This was not contemplated through the amendment process that you saw laid out in that table. Once tenanted, this building will benefit from the repark rule like any other building at this point in time based on the council's adoption of the repark rule amendments. So, but this initial tenancy was not contemplated, it was only retail. And so that's why they're here.
Okay. Joel, we'll let you finish, and then we'll hear from the applicant. Thank you.
So in terms of area public parking, just wanted to make mention, so here's a list of the parking in the area, 339 spaces. We'll point out that in red and italics, there were those two lines were inadvertently left out of the applicant's presentation from the other night, and so there was some confusion about the numbers didn't add up. They in fact do, they were just inadvertently so we've added those two lines in. So 339 is the number of parking spaces in the area. In terms of public benefit, back in 2015, the already approved development that's out there right now provided a $15,000 contribution to the Ravinia Bike Shelter, parking improvements per the development agreement, streetscape improvements, new sidewalk, et cetera. They installed, did not purchase, but installed the light poles that were part of the Ravinia Business District lighting project back in 1920. Although not a public benefit, the applicant purchased ultimately land consisting of 26 spaces of the abutting property. That was the Ravinia Housing Association land that was sold and that was purchased from them. Okay, so public benefit for this request. So that was the public benefit for the building and everything that's out there now. Okay, so now we have an incremental request, and you saw the 18 to 35 spaces depending on what things lay out. The applicant has proposed a donation of $5,000 to fund the Ravinia TIF District streetscape improvements within the Ravinia Commercial District. The public benefit standards pertain, as this is a planned unit development, and that's Article 5 or Section 155.15C calls for, in general standards, all proposed public benefits shall be A, commensurate with all zoning relief requested by the applicant, and B, proportional to the anticipated impact the proposed planned development has on adjacent properties and land uses and on the community at large. So you're looking at the incremental relief here and that impact. We had in the past, in 2016, there was an amendment that required as a condition that parking permits be purchased, both residential and employee parking permits. That was changed. It was removed, both of them in their entirety, in 2018 when the land purchase was made from the Ravinia Housing Association. Remember, the parking relief dropped down to the 25. That's the end of my presentation, Mayor, and here for any questions.
I know there's a lot of questions, so if you have them for our developer, I think that's great. But as liaison, I do want to bring forward some of the comments that came from PDC. I just thought it might be better to let the applicant first present their case, and then I'd like to.
Thank you. And before we even do that, I want to just address the public who are here. Thank you. I know this is absolutely scintillating, but it's 9 o'clock on a Monday, and I presume that most of you did not come to listen to this. So if you want to leave, we will not take it personally. I wish you a lovely evening. If you want to stick around, we'll help you get to sleep later. Why don't we first hear from the applicant? Okay, hang on. So Kim has, Councilmember Stone has questions for Joel, and then we'll go to the applicant. So why don't we have questions first for Development Director Fontaine?
I have a question for Joel, too.
You do? Okay, thank you.
So I've got two questions for you, maybe multiple questions, though. So you showed a chart of the parking that's available in the neighborhood. Has there been a parking study to determine how much of that parking is used?
That parking study was done as part of the original approval process.
In
That's the last time that was done. Yeah, I believe that's when that was. It was the, yeah.
So we don't have a current parking study
Not a new
that
one.
provides that information. That to me would be useful. The other question is, our current requirement, you said restaurants were the highest in terms of parking. So we require about 15 spaces, I think, per 1,000 square feet for restaurants. Is that appropriate? Is it so much larger than the amount required for retail and other uses? And I'm just wondering whether that's of parking and how that number is determined.
For many, many years. I was not a part of the research that went into that particular code, so I don't have the history on that, but I could tell you that's, fairly common to have a high parking demand for restaurant uses. A lot of places use 0.5 parking spaces per chair, so you could see we use a 15 per 1,000. Some communities use the other type of rate. But generally speaking, parking requirements are high for restaurant uses.
Thank you, Joel.
Councilmember Ross?
Thank you, Mayor. The Ravinia housing, the parcel that was sold, that's city property, right? That was city property that was sold to?
It was owned by the Ravinia Housing Association, which is an entity essentially created by the city. Yes, it's a component unit of government.
And has the city talked to other business owners along Roger Williams about how they feel about this parking relief? And I ask that because a lot of people don't want to park in parking lots. They look for parking that's right outside the business. And I just wondered, is there support from other businesses along Roger Williams that we know of? Or have we even asked?
So staff doesn't typically do that. What we do is we conduct a hearing process through the PDC by which abutters and abutters to abutters within 400 feet are mail noticed, certified mail noticed, and there's a sign posted on the property and other notice provided so that folks could come to the public hearing to discuss matters or hear anything that we're deliberating on at the Plan and Design Commission. So no, staff did not do that, but that's not typical that staff would do that on behalf of an applicant's application.
Might the applicant have?
I would have to
Yeah.
defer to the applicant. I don't know if they have or not.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Did you want to ask questions now, or do you want to wait till after the applicant, or?
No, I just want to make sure I present to the council questions for after the applicant.
So when do you want to speak, now or later?
I think the applicant should speak, and then I'd like to
Okey-doke.
go through the
All right.
process.
Mayor, members of the council, my name is Cal Bernstein. I'm the attorney for the applicant. I'm somewhat disappointed all these people left. I was looking forward to having a large audience. I guess, I thought they were actually. I thought, what are all these people staying around for? Let me just go directly to answer some of the questions that have already been asked. To Councilmember Ross's question regarding have you had any conversations with any of the business owners, and the answer is yes. In addition, we met with the representatives of the Ravinia Neighborhood Association, and and with Doug Parrington, and I'm going to just paraphrase what he said. The Ravinia Neighborhood Association are supportive of any initiative that enhances the economic viability of the Ravinia Business District, which they believe this request does. So we have the support of the Ravinia Neighborhood Association. To amplify what Mayor Rodering mentioned is that this is really a unique property in Ravinia. This property, and is noted in the staff report, Walgreens, and I believe there's one other property, are the only ones where this parking requirement is required. Every other property along Roger Williams does not have the requirements that this owner has to deal with. So theoretically, the most intensive use of anything in the zoning code could move 2 doors down and not have any parking requirements. All those properties are grandfathered. The parking requirement, again, the only multi-use building that it applies to is the building in question, which creates an unlevel playing field in the real world when you're trying to attract tenants. Because if, for example, a tenant wants to go into a space, they can go 2 doors to the west of us and not have a parking requirement and not have to wait to deal with going to the city council asking for relief if relief is necessary, that they can actually go to lease and they can go forward with their location without the cumbersome process of coming before the city council. And that's why we're here tonight. We're trying to preempt that. What we're trying to do is okay, what's the worst case scenario? Can this council live with the worst case scenario in order to us to level the playing field, to allow us to go out and try to attract tenants for this location without a city process involved, without partnering with the city with regard to attracting and having that tenant. I will point out that the adopted findings of fact from the Plan Design Commission found that there's a public convenience by filling the commercial spaces that have remained vacant for over 4 years. They believe that this request does not affect the nature of the essential design and the orderly development of the zoning district. And the proposed uses that we talked about at the Plan Commission are consistent with the zoning district, and the relief requests will not create traffic hazards due to the availability of on-site parking and the 339 spaces that are in the neighborhood, which are shown, which we got that information from the city's website. So that's where we found that. So Joel, if you can mind putting that, what we've done is, since we found this application, there's been 2 intervening events. We filed this back in January. The first and the second page, please. Yeah, that's it. So what has happened since we filed this application? When we started, as Joe correctly noted, this was intended back in 2015 to be a retail center. Based on the parking requirement for retail, that's 3.3 spaces per 1,000 square feet. Now, we have a different number than the city is working with. We have 4,875 square feet that is available space. There was some hallways and other things, and Al can speak to that if you're curious, but we have a slightly different number than the city is applying to their numbers, but we feel pretty confident with our numbers. So with 4,875 square feet, that is a requirement of 16 parking spaces, which if this was all retail, there would be 2 spaces and in excess of it, over and above the parking requirement. But that's not where we live in right. Things have changed. Since January, when we filed the application, we were lucky enough to enter into a lease agreement with Happy Sushi. And they are going to be moving into the corner space that's at the east portion of the property. And the Happy Sushi site, I'd say that 5 times. That is, the gross floor area is 2,172 square feet. Now, as Joel mentioned, that is not what you use to calculate the parking requirement from, because there's, what we were saying at the Plan Commission, there's front room and back room. And when we were doing earlier in our presentation, in our submittals, we showed kind of like the range, because we talked to a couple restaurateurs, not the ones that were here tonight, but other ones, and we tried to say, what's the range? How much is front and how much is back? And they indicated that it could go anywhere between 33% and 50% front to rear. Happy Sushi, we have a copy of their draft site plan or their space plan, and what their architect is telling us is that 980 square feet of the 2172 would be considered front area. And that's what you would use to calculate the parking requirement for that Happy Sushi site. I've tried to say that, okay. So the parking requirement for 980 square feet is 14.7 spaces. So based on our calculations, Happy Sushi can go into this location without any parking relief. What is that? But it's taking up all the available parking if we do that, because again, it was originally contemplated this would be retail, not restaurant, which is a higher requirement. So basically, there'd be orphan space of 1,706 square feet without any parking available. So what's the worst case scenario? What does all that mean? Well, if we're lucky enough to find a retail use for that 1,706 square feet at 3.3 parking spaces per 1,000, then there would be a 6-space deficit on location. If that whole 1,700 square feet was a restaurant, similar in size, similar as Happy Sushi, I just used that 45% gross floor area net. Using that 45%, that would mean that only the front room would be 767 square feet, which would lead to 11.5 space deficit. So those are the numbers we're really talking about here. Can this neighborhood absorb, I mean, one or two things is going to happen. Either the space is going to be left empty, or we're going to try to lease it. The owner wants to lease the space. Why we're here, as I said earlier, is we're trying to be at a competitive, at a level playing field with our competitors, which is our neighbors, because they don't have to do what we're doing. They don't have to keep coming to the council and asking for relief. So we're doing tonight is saying, under the worst case scenario, we're talking 6 to 12 spaces. And we're asking for the council to grant that relief tonight. So as we move forward, we can negotiate and go to lease and do all that without having to wait 2 months, and I credit staff with this because staff fast-tracked this application because we were talking to Happy Sushi at the time we submitted, but we don't want to have to wait 2-3 months or whatever it would take to come before this council because, frankly, we'll be in danger of losing that tenant because that tenant doesn't have to go through that. The tenant can look at there's plenty of other empty space in Ravinia that they can go to that they don't have to go through this cumbersome process. So we're asking the council to be business-friendly, to be free-thinking and saying, okay, I see these numbers, we can live with these numbers, we've offered a public benefit for the additional relief we're requesting tonight. And before I mentioned, I said there was 2 intervening events. The second intervening event happened, I think, at your last council meeting when you passed the repark ordinance that Joe had mentioned. That was not on our radar when we filed the application back in January. The good news is that once the orphan, I'm calling it the orphan, 1,700 square feet is leased up, you won't see us anymore, assuming we're coming in for permitted uses because we're grandfathered, we'll be able to repark based on the repark ordinance. So that's all good news. So when we originally filed the application, we thought we would have to keep coming back and back every time we had a tenant. You had the vision, this council had the vision to pass this repark ordinance, so that's not in play anymore. So now we're really only talking about that 1,700 square feet and trying to untie the hands of this owner to go out and find tenant for that, to basically fulfill the vision of the Ravinia Neighborhood Association to help promote the economic viability of this district. And we're available for questions if you have any.
Councilmember Bloomberg.
So I'm confused because my understanding is you did not come here to get relief for the proposed tenant that you have coming in. I understand the issues regarding the additional space. You would have to come back, or you would have to come here at some point, if this tenant comes in, if you intend to fill that space, which hopefully you will. But in terms of the immediate need for the anticipated tenant, Happy Sushi, you don't need any relief tonight.
No, we don't. But the reason why we actually filed the application was not for a specific tenant. What we were trying to do is create a level playing field so we can compete with our neighbors at attracting tenants.
I understand that.
Yes.
But what I'm saying is, one of the comments at the Plan Commission by the dissenting commissioner was his observation that there haven't been any current studies regarding parking and traffic that would really be applicable, and without that, he was not prepared to support this. My feeling is, I would like to see those studies too before I do something like you're asking. It may be that it's a great idea, ultimately, for that building and for downtown Ravinia, but I don't need to make that decision tonight since you can go ahead with what is immediately on your plate.
Yes and no. And yes, this is not a specific application for a specific tenant. This is all, originally when we filed the application, we were trying to untie our hands so we can actively market the property. In the meantime, we found a tenant in the last 2 months, which is Happy Sushi. That's an additional data point. To your response, and that was Member Henry at the PDC, and what he was requesting was a parking study. And what our response was at the time is that, you know, there are 339 available parking spaces within a block of this property. There's a lot of parking here. And the majority of the PDC felt that was unnecessary because the city's website already advertises how much parking is in the area. That's 339 spaces. And that this is the only building that has any requirements for parking, because every other building, Councilmember Hubler's Ravinia Brewery, that does not require parking, any parking at all. So what we're saying is that what we're trying, because we don't know what's going to happen over the next 30 days, 60 days, we're in at least negotiations right now with another possible tenant. That would have to be put on hold. We may lose that tenant if we now have to sit back and do a traffic study or parking study where the city's already done that parking study because you already found that there's 339 spaces. Looking quizzical because you're thinking, how are we going to lose that tenant? Well, we're going to have to wait.
That's not what I'm quizzical about.
Yeah.
Historically, this building has repeatedly asked for parking relief, also initially, principally related to their residential obligations. That's now being eaten up by their commercial obligations. It's one of the biggest buildings to be built in downtown Ravinia, and my concern is that the complexion in that area in terms of parking has changed. It may not have. It is entirely possible that this is the right thing to do, but I feel, you know, your immediate need is to get this tenant and what you can do. And within a reasonable period of time, it would seem to me that we can answer these questions more concretely.
In response, the residential parking aspect and the commercial are completely separate. They're segregated. All the residential is basically in the building. It's the commercial that's outside. There's no shared parking here. And I asked Al before we even started, and I go, how's the residential parking working? He goes, it's working fine. There's no issue with the residential parking in this. What the issue is having enough parking available for the changing commercial environment. Again, when this building was contemplated, when it was originally approved, when the variance was granted back in 2016 and subsequently amended, there was enough parking. There's plenty of parking to meet the requirement for retail. There's not parking for what as the commercial has evolved, for what the type of tenants that we're talking to right now.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, a couple questions. You said there's plenty of parking for retail, but I'm looking up at that, which says if you put Happy Sushi in one of the spaces, that you're 6 spaces deficient.
No, I said, I misunderstood. I said when it was first contemplated, if the center was, all the commercial space was retail, there's an excess amount of parking on site for commercial. If 100% of that space was leased to retail at the retail requirement of 3.3 spaces per 1,000, there's a 16-space parking requirement, and there's 18 spaces, and there's also 3 handicap spaces. We're not really talking about those, but there's 18 spaces that are available. So at 100% retail, we do meet the parking requirement.
And I understand there's 339 area, but the question isn't how many spaces there are, it's how many spaces are needed and used. So to me, having a parking study to make that determination, since the last parking study was 2015, makes some sense. And the Happy Sushi Cake just has come up tonight. We didn't have that information previously. So they're going to be moving then from the existing space a couple doors down into your building. So you're not adding a new restaurant in the area.
No, we're actually moving a restaurant that has a 0 parking requirement into our building that has a parking requirement. So actually, we're going to actually have, they're going to have parking for the first time, because in their existing restaurant, they don't have any parking.
But we end up then with an empty space down the street.
That they can lease, they can advertise for leasing tomorrow without having to worry about a parking requirement.
Right. No, I understand that part. Thank you.
Councilmember Littlewer and then Councilmember.
Okay, so I don't necessarily have as many questions right now, but I do want to share with my council members who have to make a decision or not tonight some of the observations from the PDC. And I think that it's very important because in most instances, we completely rely on our advisory groups and our commissions to really do the research and really get this done. And I do think there was, this was very rushed. And I want to really commend both staff, applicant, excuse me, and the PDC for really doing a yeoman's job. I mean, the PDC at its first meeting requested lighting and striping, and right away, the applicant came back and did that, okay? And they came to the PDC and said, we did what you wanted. Questions. So that was really good. What they didn't do, and what the PDC really did seem to want, was an accurate floor plan so they could get an estimate of numbers. But since that time, I think applicant has really come forward, in part because now they have, and to Councilman Blumberg's point, the bottom line is, at least for right now, really the priority of PDC and of the applicant, which was to get the thing done so they don't lose a tenant, to fill the space because that's really what the neighborhood wanted. And they can legally fill the space, you are correct, based on the 3 for the 1 tenant that's currently there and the 15 spaces that they would need to move Happy Sushi to the corner space. And they would still then, they would have a deficit going forward for the second group, for which they don't have a floor plan. So coming to the PDC with a 75% occupancy, 50%, 33% was just an exercise in futility. And frankly, to come here for this meeting tonight to City Council, the PDC had 4 members. They barely had a quorum. They did have a quorum, and no one would make a motion to bring this forward, because they were very confused as to how to proceed on this, because it was a blanket request. I want to really commend the applicant, because instead of giving us this blanket request, it is much more defined right now. What we know right now is, number 1, they can legally move forward, so they're not going to lose the tenant for the 1 space. In the center space, they have a trainer, I believe it's a trainer, and those are the 3 of the spaces that they also have, so those 2 are fine, and they can move forward with a 3rd. But rather than worrying about the numbers and just saying, well, what could we do with 2,000, we know that if they go for the maximum usage, although if they go for a cafe, it would be 20,
Correct.
but if they go for that type of tenant in the next space, which they may even have, but they don't have floor plans. If they do that, the question is, how do we help them, and how do we not go for what is now becoming the 5th reduction, although there have been changes in uses. So first of all, there are 339 spaces by our own study, but of those, 218 are in the north, south, and east Ravinia train lots. And of those in the north lot, there is space because the city, in fact, has control over the north lot. What that means is you have to walk out of a restaurant, you have to walk over the tracks, and right there is a public lot for, I don't know if there's a site plan or of the area, Joel, that we could pull up. So one of the things I would like to propose, and I do think there's a way so that this applicant does not have to come back, but also doesn't leave us wide open, asking for blanket relief. And it really doesn't matter, because Happy Sushi will be grandfathered in. They will not have any more requirements on them. And the second group, if we can take care of this tonight in some way, then would not have to come back either. And I'm trying to be as friendly to our applicants and our businesses as possible in this, but not giving just a blanket, yes, again, you could put in 38 spaces, because honestly, the highest usage is restaurants and cafes, and there are people parking. And there are 2 residents who came and spoke before PDC, and they said, we don't want people in those on the streets and in that area, because it is congested and difficult. So if they want to go to the 219 spaces, meaning the north, east, and west lot, that's a different story. So one thing that I would like to propose is that we move forward with this application, however, contingent on a couple of points. And I want to thank staff for going through this very clearly with me. It is not unusual for us to ask owner to provide parking spaces for their employees, so that employee parking, they buy a permit for those employees to park elsewhere, okay? If we take the 6 spaces that are available, I just want to make sure that I'm reading this correctly. Given that there's already enough parking for the on-site restaurant, the council could also reinstate a previous condition of approval for the purchase of employee parking permits from the city equal to the number of employees working at the property, which I believe is 6, and have those employees use parking that's at the north lot rather than having them use the spaces that are currently available. That would mean that we're asking 6 spaces for the 3rd and currently empty space that this applicant has, and that they would not be able to get more than the 6, but we would give them basically a variance if it's a restaurant to go down to that, and then after that usage, they're grandfathered in.
Why not have them be west of the tracks, right there at Brown Park? There are, I don't even know how many spaces there must be.
My only point is that as much as I would, well, 2 points. So I think that's a fine idea. But wherever we take the spaces from, I think that it's not unreasonable to ask this tenant to have to help us out in terms of not having more congestion on the street.
Having employee permitted.
Employee permit is also a good way to do it. But I also think that one of the things we want to ensure against is that it's just a blanket, yes, we're wide open. And frankly, a traffic study, as much as I don't disagree with my fellow council members, it would be a good idea. They really don't have the time. And it really has been a journey. And had they had this rented long ago, they wouldn't be in this conundrum, because then they would be able to go with a different use. But because it has never been leased before, that's why they are the only ones required. It's not because we're giving something good to the other businesses or making them more competitive. You need to get the place leased. So in order to help them do that, I think one of the ways to do it, since we know that the maximum, if they went with the cafes, basically, would be 11, that's the restaurants, it's 11.6.
Based on our calculations, under the worst-case scenario where there's a restaurant, it'd be about 11 parking spaces.
Well, a cafe is the worst.
That'd be worse, but that would be slightly higher.
Requirements is the worst. I'm not saying this is the idea, but I just think that what the PDC saw is important and therefore pushed it along really without going to the merits of this, which is unlike anything I've ever seen before PDC, and also to have an applicant asking for a blanket, just give us the space and let us grandfather us in, was really painful for the PDC commissioners.
Thanks for that perspective, and I think you may have more to say. Maybe I'm missing something, but we were so grateful when the property owner came in and cleaned up what was previously a blighted corner in Ravinia and brought in an opportunity for more housing, including affordable housing. We were working within the whole transit-oriented, development piece of things. And again, we have all these other businesses along here who still access the same public lots. I just don't understand what the big production is here. And maybe, again, I appreciate all of it. But again, I'm hearing, this was rushed, but then we hear the comments, we need to streamline our processes. There's so much going on in this conversation, when to me, it just seems like we finally got somebody who came in, something good for this area, who wants to help another restaurant move into a better space. Maybe potentially those buildings to the west can get cleaned up as well. What am I missing?
No,
guess,
Mayor, I
is
don't
my
think you're
question.
missing anything.
Okay.
And that's why I think the reason we're all bending over so hard to try and make this work is because we are very grateful for this beautiful building they've put up and for what they've done. And that's why tonight they actually have to go forward. And frankly, I think if we do this with the permitting of the parking spaces for the employees, they can move forward with their third property too, and they'll be grandfathered in after that.
Are we requiring, Joel, are we requiring others in this area to pay for employee parking?
But they don't have the requirement.
Not that I'm aware of, Mayor.
Okay.
I'd have to go back to some of the previous decisions, but I don't think in your last decision where there was a physical therapy office that you required that, but I would have to check. I do just.
The
can't
zoning was
quite
much
recall.
smaller.
It was a much smaller use, though, yeah.
Well, I know two other council members want to be heard. I don't want to cut you off. Do you have more that you wanted to?
Especially if they have any questions.
Okay, thank you and thanks again for your representation on the PDC as a liaison. Stone, everybody's got something to say. So why don't we just start with Councilmember Stone, go to Councilmember Bloomberg, and then we'll continue on.
I'm gonna switch topics slightly to the lighting. I thought this was the most interesting part. So I heard that the conditions include a condition that they be 3,000 or less Kelvin in terms of the fixtures. But I assume that all the fixtures are going to be compliant with our lighting code, so that means they will be dark skies compliant, or dark skies friendly and certified, as well as having that color temperature. The one thing I did notice from the cut sheet, the sconces I don't think are dark skies compliant, based on what was in the packet, so I'm assuming that's not going forward. But they're also incandescent lights, which sort of puzzled me, given that an incandescent light, those were specified at about 100 watts a piece. I believe you could get an LED for about 10 and save yourself a whole lot of money on energy costs, since those are probably on a significant percentage of the time.
We're sold.
Thank you.
I have no response to that. Whatever. We're going to be code compliant. I mean, and the reason why we did that is that Commissioner Arnold at the PDC wanted to promote the connectivity from the front of the store to the back, and we went ahead and we put the lighting in there. We're not married to it, and we'll work with staff and as the permitting process goes forward to make sure that we meet those requirements.
Thanks. No, it made sense to put the lighting and a pathway back there and the signage, so thank you for that.
Great, thank you. Councilmember Bloomberg.
Thank you, Mayor. I found your last remarks pretty, putting this in context, and that's helpful to me.
Thanks.
The only other thing that I want, there was your suggestion, employee parking permits. It's an appealing idea. Frankly, this property was asked to provide permits for parking as a part of the original PUD, and they came back in less than a year and asked to be released from that. And although a couple of us had suggested that we waive that for a year and see how the majority of the council decided to waive it entirely. So I'm not sure that requiring parking permits, whether they A, necessary, and B, are going to, we're potentially looking at being asked. I would prefer to just look at the proposal as it is and make my decision based on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Tapia?
Yeah, The spirit of my remarks would be along the lines of the mayor's. I am perplexed as well about why this is so difficult. I drive by that building pretty much every day. I come up Burton on my way home, and it makes me depressed as a resident to see that corner empty for 4 years. And so while there's all this zoning stuff, which we want to be respectful for, and there's a reason for it, you know, some things just don't fit the situation. And if we keep dragging this situation out, we run the risk of that building or that corner remaining empty for even longer. And so what are we about? Are we about helping our businesses, helping our residents? I mean, it's sad to walk past an empty building for 4 years. It tells you that something is not thriving, it's not prosperous. Plus, whatever use, like a Happy Sushi, being there would add to vibrancy. So in terms of triaging the dilemmas here, I think that as long as it's reasonable, and it seems reasonable to me what's been asked, that making this exception so that now that they're very close to having a bird in the hand to close the deal, and they have some things in the pipeline to finish the other empty space, I think the residents benefit and the businesses benefit, and not just this business, but the other restaurants, because we know you create more of a restaurant row, it's good for the vibrancy of the city. And the thing that weighs really heavily with me is that the Ravinia Neighborhood Association is very supportive of this, and we fully respect RNA. They have been great for the community, they care for the community, they advocate for the community. So for this to have their endorsement, I mean, that weighs for a lot. So I'm thinking, you know, and to the spirit of what we're trying to do to make doing business in Highland Park easier and more streamlined, we always want to be respectful of our code and the quality of that, but you know, the staff is working very hard to streamline things, and I really respect that because it's been a couple years, many years of conversation, but you know, they're finding ways to maintain our standards and yet find ways to make this easier. Make the applicant come back yet again with all the uncertainty. Every day that passes costs money, it's revenue, income that is not produced, and it has a cascading effect. Then Happy Sushi is in a certain amount of uncertainty. And businesses, one of the things that businesses abhor and that really undermine their sense of confidence in their business and also in the city they're doing work, uncertainty. And what we're doing here, we keep prolonging this, is creating uncertainty for a lot of different stakeholders here. So I would urge us to really think about the bigger picture here, be responsible, and I think the PDC is very responsible. I think City Council Member Littleworth has been very responsible. You know, the city staff has been very responsible. Make sure they're asking all the right questions, being creative, and I think they've done the heavy lift, and they're sort of delivering a really good solution here that I think merits our support.
Okay. Councilmember Ross?
Thank you, Mayor. I have 2 questions, and I do want to say that I was absolutely thrilled to hear that Happy Sushi is going in there. I think that's going to be a great thing. And it's, you know, well, for obvious reasons, it doesn't detract from the parking situation. A question I have is if the other, 2 questions. One is if the other tenant that potentially fills the remaining spaces is, you know, a breakfast place or, you know, a food service place that is a competitor to, you know, what's a business on the street, takes occupancy of the vacant space, you know, is that an issue in terms of our having granted relief? We're talking about level playing fields. Is that a level playing field? And will they have an issue with our giving that relief? That's just sort of a question that comes to mind. And the other one is, if we grant the relief, does it need to be 2 years? Is 1 year enough to lease the space? I mean, I guess I would like some incentive to lease the spaces. And I don't know that 2 years is necessary to do that. Those are my two questions. Yeah,
Joel, did you
Mayor,
want to?
yeah, there was some conversation at the PDC on this matter, but ultimately did not result in a recommendation to make that a condition.
Okay.
on the length of,
The sunset
Yeah, on the sunset provision, and
Sunset,
staff had
okay.
not recommended that, both staff.
but to my other question, that if it's a competitor, I mean, this comes to mind actually very much because of the economic incentive and pushback that we got from businesses that felt it was, unfair to incentivize their competitors. This is a form of, the relief is in a way an economic incentive of sorts, not direct comparison, not
I
apples to
understand.
apples, but yeah.
I understand, but respectfully would say in terms of the context of land use conditions, I would steer away from a condition like that.
And also in response, if there was a competitor on the street, that competitor does not have a parking requirement. So we would actually be at the disadvantage because we have a parking requirement. They don't. So they shouldn't object because we'd be under the same circumstances as they actually. The disadvantage, they don't have any parking at all. We have 15 spaces in the back that are not going to be used. Happy Sushi most likely will be using those in the evening. If there's a different use that's more geared towards the morning, there's 15 spaces in the back that will be open that Happy Sushi will not be using. And actually, we would have the advantage because we have parking and we paid to put that parking in where the competitor doesn't have the parking.
Councilmember,
And
sorry.
one last piece, I mean, back to the 2-year sunsetting versus 1 year, the PDC clearly didn't see that as necessary, but we're not the PDC. I mean, we could consider a shorter sunsetting.
But in terms of land use regulation, I just think that you're making a decision whether this is appropriate relief, and it's not, the nexus to the temporal nature of it is tenuous, is just my perspective.
I'm just seeing it as a incentive to move on leasing.
Well,
I understand, and the
yeah.
PDC thought the same thing as well.
There's a financial incentive to lease because it's costing you money having the space empty every day. So that's plenty of incentive. That's why we're here, is trying to kickstart it to try to make it easier to lease those spaces because it's costing them a lot of money to have those spaces empty.
I'll leave it at that.
Councilmember Littleworth?
Ultimately, Councilmember Ross, I have to say that I think the PDC was trying very hard to get comfortable with that and wanted to do that. But actually, because we wanted so badly to move along, I think that's why they decided, let's send this to the council. And the other thing is then they wouldn't be grandfathered in. If they didn't rent it in a certain period of time, then they would still have this hanging over their heads in terms of the numbers. So frankly, to my other members, I really do believe that the priority is exactly as I stated it, that we have a property owner who really wants to lease this out. We have a community that's very upset that it's been open as long as it has been. We don't want uncertainty. I don't think the PDC wanted uncertainty. I'm really impressed that the applicant came back with something much more concrete. I would be very happy moving this forward and requesting that we quite correct, Councilmember Blumberg, staff did send me stuff that said that they did have the parking spaces for the employees, that we reinstate that, and that we also require that subject to plans being presented so that we know what the disparity is, that we do move forward with this motion, but not the blanket motion that was given to us in our packets, but in fact and I don't know if that needs to be redrafted or frankly, Corporation Counsel, if you could say it for us, but I would like to move, Mayor, to move forward with this, recognizing that there are ample spaces for the one tenant Happy Sushi, but asking that in terms of relief that they be required to supply the other 6 spaces and do that through parking permits for their employees to free that up so that whatever comes in, if it's retail, the 6 will be fine. If it's a restaurant, they'll be halving it, but they won't be coming back to us because after this, they'll be grandfathered in and they'll be on a level playing field with the other groups in the area.
Mayor, it sounds like Councilmember Litterer wants
Yes.
to make a motion, but before she does, let me help you frame it.
Thank you. That's what I was asking
And let
for.
me remind you that while you introduce this as agenda item 9, it's related to agenda item 10. We have drafted, to move this along, we have drafted a special use ordinance, which is agenda item 9, and we have drafted what I believe is the 4th amendment to the development agreement in agenda item 10. We understand, and I've got to look to Director Fontaine. I understand, but I want to make sure you do, the nature of the amendment that Councilmember Lederer set forth this evening. Joel, are you in understanding of it?
Yeah, my only question would be about the floor plan. So the relief will be granted, and then the floor plan would be supplied to my office regardless.
The floor, I don't think we need the floor plan part. We're not going to issue building permits unless we see a floor plan, but.
That's fine.
The 6 spaces, did you resolve where the 6 spaces, employee spaces, which side of the tracks, which lot?
They can park anywhere.
It doesn't matter anyway. Okay. And so,
Before you even continue?
okay,
or do you-
okay. Yeah, I just want to remind you to do this as combined with agenda items 9 and 10, and we're able to do it tonight if you desire.
All right, so, but the motion is for 9 and for 10, impacting the policy as stated.
Correct.
All right, hang on. Bloomberg, Ross, heard your second, thank you.
Okay, so there's a motion. Seconded. I'm not going to support the motion, ironically, because I'm not agreeable to requiring this property owner to pay for a number of permits which he may not need, which he hasn't needed in the past and came to seek relief for under other circumstances. I think the discussion about making a level playing field, the discussion that the mayor put forward of try to get this leased up, I think that's the main goal. I don't want to burden this with additional requirements. I think, it is what it is. I think we've given the owner of the property essentially what he needs to fill this space. And I want to give him what he wants so that he can get what we would like done in that area.
Thank you.
Okay, so you are,
I'm not, because of the requirement for the 6.
for the employee,
For the employee permits. And if it doesn't pass, I'm willing to consider a motion
without
that.
okay, thank you.
Mayor, could I just there's a lot more people here than I thought would be. I don't know if there'd be any public comment.
Let me finish with my
Okay.
council comment.
Okay, all right.
Happy to throw it open to our stalwarts in the crowd here. Stick around, why not? Okay. What was the other question?
It's actually not a question. For the public record, I wanted to say that it actually did mean a lot to me that you asked the Ravinia Neighborhood Association. I think that's really important that they support this, and for the reasons that most of council spoke about leasing up this space. I do think this is important to do.
Thank you. I agree, by the way, with Councilmember Bloomberg, so I will not be supporting, but I'm happy to return to the question regarding this entire conversation minus the employee permit requirement. Councilmember Stone?
I agree on the parking with the mayor and Councilmember Bloomberg. So that changes the motion at all at this point.
Any interest in amending your motion?
Well, before I do want to say a couple of things. First of all, the public benefit that's offered here is very, very small. I think it really does not stand up to muster, and I know staff had some questions about it, and frankly, we asked several times what would be the normal one in this. So for example, when we used charge per space. It was $15,000 per space, and we got rid of that, but at least that gave us some precedent in terms of how you might frame this. And they're coming up with a benefit of $5,000. I know there have been benefits in the past. They've also come before us several times for several variances, and all of them have had to do with parking. We have reduced it significantly. And I think just saying that there are parking spaces out there, it's not taking it seriously. And frankly, the two people who live across the street were very worried that people would just be parking on some of those 339 spaces, which is why I really like the idea. And when you buy a permit for someone, then those people really do park over there, and they don't take the spaces in front or right and back that would be used by customers. And I think that's the only way to enforce that type of thing. And that's why I feel very strongly, actually, that we should have additional limitations. Again, the public benefit here, I didn't even bring it up. I really do think they've been through the ringer, and I appreciate the efforts they're putting forth, but I actually think that there should be more given to the city based on that.
Thank you. Councilmember Stone, and then I'm going to open it to the public, and then let's take a vote because it's getting late.
I agree on the public benefit not being enough. I wasn't going to bring it up either because it's late and we've talked this through quite a bit. But yeah, $5,000 for 6 to 12 parking space reduction for going forward, plus, you know, it's a lot of parking spaces. And if you multiply that by $15,000, it's a lot more dollars. So I would be more amenable to figuring out a way to increase the public benefit, to make it more commensurate with the relief being requested, rather than to require the permits. I think the permits just make it a little complicated.
Thanks. Councilmember Tapia.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, we're not going to have the votes on the motion that has been put on the table. So I'd be willing, you know, seeing that, and it seems that there might be the votes to still pass this without that provision. And there is something on the table being suggested about maybe let's put our energy on the public benefit. And I don't know what is in people's minds about what that public benefit would be, but we have an opportunity to declare that today. You mentioned 15,000. I don't know if that's what you had in mind as the benchmark. But
that would be a minimum. That would, in my estimation, that is the minimum. Frankly, I would think if it's 6 spaces we're talking about, then I would think it should be 30,000. And I really do think there is a public benefit that's necessary here. I'm very impressed with what's done before, but each time there was some sort of concession in terms of a variance for that. So, I mean, you know, keep the community happier in terms of employees parking elsewhere, and that's why I was willing to go away. But if not, I think that the city needs an additional benefit, and I would be willing to accept a friendly amendment to some other effect than the parking, if that's what you all think is a better way to do it. That was my way of cutting the baby on this one.
All right, so we kind of went backwards from the seconder to the motion.
Sounds like the seconder may have withdrawn his second.
Right, yeah.
Okay.
There's no motion.
Okay, so now do you want to reapproach with your motion in terms of the public benefit piece? And I urge you, like, within the bounds of reality, in terms of the public benefit number. I understand what you're saying. I think it's somewhere between 5,000 and 30.
I think you're right.
So,
Mayor, can I address that, please?
go for it.
Okay, thank you. We're probably an hour 4 of hearings with regard to this application, and this is the first time the public benefit has ever been mentioned. The PDC found that the public benefit was sufficient when they recommended going forward. And I want to go back to the original public benefit for the original approval back in 2015. And Councilwoman Stone mentioned that there was a significant parking relief that was granted in 2015. In fact, it was 50 parking spaces. And then that was subsequently amended to increase to 51 parking space amount of relief. And what was the public benefit required for those 50 parking spaces? $15,000. And so what we're asking for tonight is we're asking for between 5 and 12 spaces of probably relief, where basically $15,000 and some other improvements that were going to be made anyway with the development was sufficient for 50 spaces. And now we offered 5,000, which is a third, which is actually and proportionally much higher than what was required before. So we're just asking for some consistency with the previous approvals.
Okay. Any comments from the public? You all hung in here? Okay.
I can't not see doing it for under a public benefit of 15.
Well, make your motion, see if there's,
All right, so I would move that we go forward with this current proposal as it has, not as stated in the record, but that we move forward and instead of a condition of 6 spaces, that we ask for a public benefit increase to $15,000.
And I'll second that.
Yeah, it's agenda items 9 and 10 as drafted, but increase the public benefit from 5,000 to 15,000.
any other discussion with this group? Nope. Yes?
I guess I wish I could hear more from my fellow council members about how they feel about that, rather than,
I think it's high. I'll throw that out there. Go for it.
I think it's high based on what we just saw of what the public benefit was before, but I don't think it's high considering the total number of spaces that relief is requested for. So I don't know. I'm on
And
the
that was
fence.
8 years ago, by the way.
May I ask the applicant what the response would be to 15,000?
I'm Alfred Claremont. I've been asked a question, and the question is,
Would you be willing to accept a public benefit of 15,000, which is what the motion is?
yeah, and we did that before, as Mr. Bernstein enunciated. Why don't we go with 10?
I'll withdraw my second.
Again, there's no motion on the table.
All right.
Because it's 10 o'clock, we're going to go with it. Number 9.
I'd like to move that we 9 and 10 together, and we grant the relief requested.
We're changing the public benefit from 5,000 to 10,000.
Correct.
And then I'll second that.
Sounds great. Let's call the vote.
Councilmember Ross.
aye.
Councilmember Tapia.
Aye.
Councilmember
Aye.
Littlewer. Councilmember Stone. Councilmember Bloomberg. Mayor Rotering.
Aye, 6 ayes, no nays, and 10 as amended are approved. Thank you very much, both of you, for
Thank you.
your zealous advocacy, Council. With that, I'm seeking a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second. All in favor, say aye.